Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
My guest on today's episode of the For Love and Money podcast is a woman after my own heart. Aga Bajer is obsessed with the opportunity to create thriving cultures by understanding what it is that people need to do their best work. Aga wears many hats as the driving force behind Culture Brained, where she steers the ship as both founder and CEO. And beyond leading her company, she's also the author and a captivating keynote speaker known for sharing insights that resonate deeply with her audience. She's the voice and brain behind the Culture Lab podcast, where she dives into the intricacies of organizational culture and has built a vibrant community for culture leaders around these conversations. Her impactful contributions, books, and thought leadership in her field have earned her a spot as one of LinkedIn's top voices of 2024, marking her as a must-follow for those interested in the world of company culture and leadership. I absolutely loved our conversation. Aga challenges some of the truths in quotation marks, that we as a society seem to have accepted with very little rigor. She shares the insights she's uncovered through her research, as well as through her own experience. And for Aga, her work is personal, and this shines through our interview. The need for people to feel a sense of belonging is the central theme of this episode, and Aga also shares with us what it takes to help foster a sense of belonging in organizations. Enjoy. Aga, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast.
Thank you for having me. Such a joy to be with you here, Carolyn.
I'm super excited to get into this conversation. Aga and I have come across each other recently, and I've participated in a fireside chat with one of her groups, and the conversations that we've started having are just giving me goosebumps, and they sort of intersect with a lot of the themes that I've been exploring. So, Aga, first question, the same question for every guest is there a role for love in business?
Carolyn, if you asked me this question 10 years ago, I would probably answer, well, I hope so, but I wouldn't be sure. But approximately 10 years ago, I got obsessed about what we need in order to do our best work. And so I started obsessively interviewing people, basically asking them the following question. Tell me about a time you did your best work, and then some follow-up questions. And I literally spoke and asked this question to anyone who was willing to answer. And it was astonishing to me how different the people that I talked to were, and how similar, on the other hand, the stories that I got were. And what I realized is emerging from these stories is that we need at least three things to really do our best work. And the first thing that I noticed is that people need a sense of fun at work. And what I mean by that is we need to be able to enjoy the work that we are doing. The second thing that we absolutely need to do our best work is a sense of meaning. And finally, the third one is we really need a sense of belonging to do our best work. And when you really think deeper about what these things are, the sense of fun, what it really is love for the work that we're doing. It's love for the craft. It's love for mastery, getting better at what we're doing. A sense of meaning is love for a cause, something that we deeply care about and that we want to make a meaningful contribution to. And a sense of belonging is a sense of love for the people that we work with, for the people that we serve. And I would dare say self-love as well. So, today, long story short, my answer to this question is absolutely yes. Not only is there a place for love in business, but I deeply believe, and I know it, that love is actually the fuel of high performance and of business success.
Whoa, there's the quote right up there. What was it? Love is the fuel of high performance and business success. I love that. I love it. And
It really is.
I love your answer to this question because it breaks it down and you're not afraid to embrace a word that traditionally is not connected with business. And yet we humans, love is what really inspires the best of us, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And, language is difficult. I run a consultancy. We talk a lot to large corporates and senior leaders. And I'll be honest with you, there is a lot of resistance to this word and the notion of love in the workplace. And I know that you know, because you have been working in the space and your book is For Love and Money, and you talk a lot about this. So I'm sure that you've experienced similar reactions. And the crazy thing is that people don't just resist love, but they also resist the word fun at work. Because I think we've been conditioned to kind of separate these two things. And even, the way we were brought up, for most of us, at least in the Western world, our parents said, well, you do your homework first and then you can play, right? And it seems like fun and work are completely separate. And also, of course, work is somehow more noble than having fun. So there's a lot of resistance around these notions. And it really drives me crazy, Carolyn, because I know deep down in my bones now, and there's plenty of research that supports this, that we absolutely need these things, and we need to figure out how we can infuse those things into our workplaces if we really want to unlock human greatness. And so I think that, we are both on a mission to create a higher sense of comfort with talking about these things and using this language unapologetically. And most importantly, figuring out how do you really practice that in business.
That's amazing. I read an article recently from a researcher in Europe. Creative Destruction is the name of his blog. And the article he wrote, it's one I keep going back to. It's called Pleasure Activism. And basically he says the operating principle of the modern world is pain.
Yes.
Work is a chore. We've got to do it so that we can enjoy our
necessary
lives.
evil.
Yeah. And like, who made those rules? Maybe they were made in the factory, the industrial age. But we live in a very different age now. And this idea of fun and joy and love and, doing something that fills you up through your work is such a massive opportunity. So I can't wait to get into this subject with you. But first, I would love you to share with our listeners, Aga, where you are today, just briefly, with Culture Brained and whatever else you're doing. But I'm keen to get a sense of your journey to what you're doing today.
Well, I think that one of the pivotal moments for me that's really put me on the path that I am today was a moment when one of my good friends, Łukasz, approached me, and we're talking 30 years ago, and said, hey, do you want to go into business together? And where I was at that time was a completely different space. So I was studying creative writing and teaching English as a second language. And basically my dream was becoming a writer and writing the next great novel, so business was definitely not on my radar, nothing I really knew about, and something that I had zero passion for. But apparently he was very convincing, because eventually I joined him and we created this business on an extremely naive premise. Because first of all, when he approached me, he didn't even have an idea what kind of business. And then I said, well, if we can create a business that makes people happy, that would be cool. And we started talking and brainstorming, 22-year-old kids, what things make people happy. And a joke was, because everyone knew I love ice cream, is that ice cream makes people happy. Flowers make people happy. But we eventually landed on ice cream. And we created an ice cream factory without having any background knowledge in that, super naively. And we did create an amazing product. It was very successful. This business, by the way, still exists. And it's one of the biggest ice cream producers in Central Eastern Europe.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
It is, yeah. pretty crazy, really, when I think about this. It was such a stroke of luck because obviously, as I'm saying, we really had no idea what we were doing. We had a lot of passion and certainly a lot of hunger, but we had no idea what we were doing. And so what I quickly realized running that business with Łukasz was that you can have the best product in the world, but it won't necessarily make people happy until you figure out what you really stand for and what sort of working environment you want to create. One of the things that I noticed very quickly is that whilst people might have a certain amount of pleasure consuming our product, the people who worked for us weren't that happy. And I really wanted to crack that code of company culture. And I went down this rabbit hole, trying to learn myself. And again, I had no background in these topics. So initially, it was really just reading books, from Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence and stuff like that. And eventually, I really went on this quest. I started pursuing jobs that were linked to that. And I joined large consultancies like Hay Group and Korn Ferry and then Pricewaterhouse to really figure that out. Like, how do you create an environment where people can thrive, and where people can feel like work is really a fulfilling experience? And culture has always been something that fascinated me. One of the reasons for that was my personal experience, because I'll be honest, one of these consultancies that, I'm not going to name names, that was super famous, that I wanted to work for so much that I would have worked for them for free if, if that would make them hire me. And they did hire me, but I realized that very quickly that the culture there was really toxic and I was unable to have the level and extent of success and impact that I wanted to have on the world. And then I changed and I was the same person. We're talking, 2 months difference. And I joined a different organization and suddenly things clicked for me. And, in terms of the impact that I was making on our clients and the level of confidence that I was feeling and the deliverables that I was able to create, it was literally incomparable. So in the first one, I was somewhere here. In the second one, it was like really skyrocketed my performance and my impact. And that made me scratch my head because I was like, I'm the same person. And yet, the second environment is really unlocking something in me. And so I got even more fascinated about the impact of environment on our performance, our ability to do great work, but also our sense of well-being, mental well-being. I had major anxiety issues in the first company that disappeared, miraculously in the second one. So these are the experiences, I think, that really shaped my interests and my obsession about workplace culture.
And wouldn't it be interesting if you hadn't had that second experience?
Mm-hmm. I would have never known what I was capable of. And that's scary. That's really scary.
And you would have never known, apart from what you're capable of, that environments like that can exist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how many people have gone through their careers without ever having experienced that. Yeah. And the default, they assume work is something I have to do, I have to, turn up to. And it's just something that, is what I have to do in order to live my life outside of it.
Just get a paycheck, the necessary evil. And, I hear this so often, even now, although I do believe that largely I live in this bubble where, people generally care about creating great work environments, but still often I will hear from people, it's Monday, I have to go to work. Oh my God, when is Friday coming? And it's really living from one weekend to another and living in a state of mind, as you say, where you don't even know that different is possible, right? And for me, it makes me very sad, but at the same time, it gives me huge motivation to do this work because there's so much that can change and it's exciting just to think about the potential.
That's it, the potential, right? It's so my husband, he makes fun of me, and he says, you would do your work even if you weren't paid for it. Now,
Same.
I live in Sydney. I can't afford to do that. But he's not wrong, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the word obsession early in this interview, and I am obsessed with what I do. I go to sleep thinking about it. I actually dream about it. So I am obsessed with it, and I love it. And the energy it gives me is extraordinary. And
It really is. Yeah, I feel, Carolyn, we are super lucky. I don't want to come across as, and I think it is a privilege, right? To have that passion and have the right conditions where you can say, this is what I'm going to devote my career to and pursue that. And I know that it's not possible for everyone. Sometimes people do need to stay in a job that doesn't fulfill them because they need to feed their kids. But it is such a powerful dream, I think, for a lot of people to have. And there are not a lot of examples still, and not a lot of role models. So I feel that at the same time, I want to acknowledge that we're both privileged to be able to be in this position. But at the same time, I want to be vocal about this, because the message here is it's possible. It's not a pipe dream. It's not something that doesn't exist in real life. You really can have work life that fulfills you, that makes you feel excited on Monday, that, and doing the work, as you say, that you would have done even if no one paid you for it.
Shh, don't tell too many people. You mentioned the word before, potential, and this is what it comes down to, is we all have so much potential. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was saying, do you remember when you first entered the workforce, out of university or school, college, whatever it was? How did you feel? And, and I think we can all identify with that sense of nervousness, but also excitement and energy and curiosity. And, we
like anything
to...
is possible, right?
Yeah.
I had
And
that sense. I remember that. Like, I thought anything is possible, really.
That's right. And you're eager to contribute your value to the world. And yet so often that gets stripped out of people very, very quickly. And I go back to that word you use, potential. We are not realizing the potential of our people, the full potential. They're only bringing part of what they're capable of. And if we're not realizing their potential, then organizations are not fulfilling their potential. And there is so much opportunity to be unlocked. So it's such a fascinating subject. Tell me about Culture Brained.
So Culture Brained is a consultancy that focuses on helping organizations to build that environment. And, we have a crazy dream and a crazy mission, which is to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And I do realize that probably I am not going to see this change take place in my lifetime, and that's totally okay. But this is a space where we're doing our work. We help companies codify their culture so that they know what the desired culture is. We help them embed and activate it, especially, in companies that grow, because once you sort of move from the stage of a startup and early scale up and start growing, especially internationally, it becomes incredibly challenging to cultivate that consistent culture that basically is rooted in the same principles. And in order to be able to do that, you need to know what the desired culture is, but you also need really strong systems and practices that are going to create the architecture for the right behaviors to emerge organically. And then finally, the third thing that we help our clients with is we help them evolve their culture, because culture is not static anyway, and it's changing. And very often, companies, organizations, and leaders come to the realization that what brought us here, that Marshall Goldsmith thing, what brought us here will not take us there. And so we need to evolve as an organization, and we need to help our culture evolve as well. And a part of this work is also creating a community of practitioners in organizations that are on the same mission as we are, which is making work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And for me, it has been an incredible privilege to be serving this community because, I see people doing the work in the trenches with incredible commitment, really working on creating these sort of work environments. Because again, back to love, they have this love, care, and commitment to serve people in a way that people haven't been served so far. So we're all trying to figure out new, better ways of cultivating healthy cultures. It's a very creative space where heads of people and culture, CMOs, CEOs, founders come in and learn from world-class experts like yourself. You were generous enough to join us for a session. And so this experience, it's really a dialogue and a conversation where we pick our guests' brains, but we also co-create new thoughts and approaches together. We do other modalities as well, a lot of things that really help people implement those things in the workplace. So as you can see, that's definitely something that I feel a lot of enthusiasm about. I really love what we're doing. I feel very privileged to be able to be doing this work.
And Aga, we've spoken before about people like us do things like this. We've spoken about, Seth Godin, who you've had on your podcast, which is amazing. And
in the community as well. He's, one of these generous souls who just, well, again, we shouldn't tell anyone, but he really quite often says yes when he feels like this is something that's going to make a difference. And he actually generously accepted our invitation and joined us for a conversation in the community as well.
That's incredible. And what I wanted to say is, it seems to me that you have created a community of people like us who are committed to creating change through culture and realizing that potential that we've been talking about. So congratulations on that. And it's exciting to see the work you're doing. And having been, in one of your sessions, what I loved about it was small and intimate, but you made space for some deep conversations. And that's what we need today, rather than just scrape the surface. We do need to go deeper, because we do need to change the way we do things. So I love that you're doing that.
Well, thank you. And, the congratulations are, of course, wonderful thing to hear, but this is really, I am not the person to take credit for that. It's the entire community. And the fact that we have been able to create that, the whole credit really goes to our members, and it's their commitment and their curiosity and their kindness and their boldness that make it all possible. And when it comes to the format, I'm so glad that you've noticed, because of course it's by design. I really didn't want us to just put more webinars out in the world. We don't need more webinars out in the world. Right. I think we can all agree on that. And so I thought, right, if you have a global community and people cannot meet physically on regular basis, what are the alternatives? And we landed on this format that is very, very intimate, where we always invite just a handful of people to create a conversation. We record these sessions and we share with our entire community, but we want to keep that sense of, it's really, we're sitting around the fire and having a chat about topics that are really near and dear to our hearts, and then think about, how do I bring this thinking into my work? And it's been working really beautifully. So it's always such a joy to host these sessions for our members.
It is such a refreshing take and contrast to this concept of bigger, better. Like, we need big audiences, we need massive, masses amount of followers. We've got to go scale big, mass, and actually go, no, let's go small and deep and really, really, explore. And I think that's a great model and way to think about things. Now,
And it's a terrifying way to build business, by the way. I don't know if you have been experimenting with these principles as well, like going small but going deep and relying on social contagion and the fact that, if it's great, people will speak to other people and that's the way it's going to grow. But I have to say, as a person who's leading a business, it's it's certainly nerve-wracking sometimes, because you really have to be convinced that what you are doing has a deeper meaning and you want to grow it intentionally. But you look around and everyone is talking about scaling and everyone is talking about huge numbers. And sometimes, I scratch my head and I ask myself, is this the right way to go, right? Or maybe, I will wake up one day and realize I have no business to speak of. So I just don't want to create this impression that it's an easy path. It's a very fulfilling path, though. And, we work with a lot of startups and scale-ups, and the ones that I am in awe of because they really make a difference are the ones that don't think about scaling as their number one goal. And I think that's the difference, because of course, at some point, you can reach scale and scale your impact as well. But the number one thing is always impact. It's not just numbers and profits, which are necessary. Obviously, they are the oxygen for our business. We need that, but it should never be the sole purpose of why we're in business.
No, it's almost like the new dollars. If not dollars, then followers and, numbers. But I think it takes courage, and, you kind of have to hold your nerve, because, I completely understand when you're running a business. But the fact is, and this is what inspires me about you, is when you know what you're trying to create, the impact that you want to achieve in the world, there's not a straight line to it. You've got to explore, you've got to try different things. And ultimately, Aga, isn't that what leadership is? We use this word leadership, we throw it around so easily. We call people leaders, and yet so many of them are just, where are they leading people to? Is my question. It seems to me many of them are managing a business, but those that are prepared to explore, to be curious, to try new ways of doing things, your community, others who I meet in my network, who, someone I know was building a community of impact-driven businesses. And she started off thinking she needed to build this big community. And then she suddenly went, oh no, I've suddenly realized I don't want the biggest community. I want the deepest community. And she said, she did some research and she found, I can't remember what the optimum number was, but she found there is an optimum number of, community members. And she has set about going and building a community that has depth, and its impact is deep. So
that's exactly my philosophy as well. It's so interesting. I need to meet this woman now, because this is exactly how I thought about this as well. And actually, Robin Dunbar, I think then you might be thinking about Dunbar number, and he basically talks about how we can only maintain 5 really deep relationships in our lives. And then, he talks about the next number, I think it's 15, and then 50. And then ultimately, the maximum number of people that we can have sort of a meaningful relationship is 150. And that's it. And so my commitment to our community members is that for this tier of our community, the number will never exceed 150, because I'm, just like her, interested in those meaningful connections, not just, a number of people. It would be so easy, right, to say, oh, we want thousands of people. But what does it really mean for the community and the connections there if you have thousands of people? So I think even when and if we grow to tens of thousands of people, I see it through this lens of 150, small communities within the larger community.
I will introduce you to her because I think you'll have a lot in
Thank
common.
you.
Abby Pantano, she's actually been a guest on this podcast.
Oh,
So I'll be
wonderful.
delighted to make that introduction.
Thank you.
But now we're actually talking about with these communities about a theme that I know you're incredibly passionate about and you're writing a book about, and that is the theme of belonging. So I'd love you to share with us a little bit about your book, what it's about, when it's coming out, anything you can tell us about it.
So it's a funny story with this book because, I've already mentioned how I got obsessed about figuring out what helps people do their best work. And I landed on these three pillars: fun, meaning, and belonging. And I was approached by a publisher and pitched the book. They loved it. And basically, the title of the book was Culture Craft, and it was going to be all about how you can create an environment where people do have this sense of fun, meaning, and belonging. And as I started creating the outline of that book and fleshing out a little bit more details and working on it, again, back to the topic, maybe it's the story of my life, I don't know, but I realized that in order to be able to pack these three things into one book, it would have to be quite superficial. And I wanted to go deep. And so I thought, this cannot be a book about fun, meaning, and belonging. I think I need to zoom in on one first. And so, the reason why I decided that belonging needs to be first is the following. I don't know if you know about this, Carolyn, but I'm sure that you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we take it as gospel, right? And Maslow said, in order for us to pursue other needs, we first need to have our basic needs met, like a need for shelter and need for food and sex. And then comes belonging, and then self-actualization and so on and so forth. And we believed Maslow, although it turns out he never carried out any formal scientific research into the topic. He just had a hunch.
Is that right?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy?
Oh
just like so
God.
many men of his era. He was like, okay, I have this theory. And I think it just tells us a lot about many things that we deeply believe in, how often they are not true, and yet we take them as gospel. The great thing about belonging, though, is that from Maslow's times, there were other researchers who were very rigorous when it comes to science, and they have actually proved Maslow wrong. And we now know, although it's not a popular notion, that belonging is the number one human need. And, it kind of blew my mind when I thought about what is happening in the workplace right now, because basically, I feel like the art of creating belonging is becoming a lost art. It's exceedingly more difficult for all of us to have that sense of belonging for a number of reasons that we can talk about. And yet, so the number one human need is not being met because we forgot how to do it, basically. And yet we expect people to be able to be great parents, great friends, excellent employees, great business people. It's a little bit like expecting someone who is homeless and hungry to exceed expectations and excel, right? How realistic is that? How real? And we wouldn't, right? You wouldn't expect an employee who doesn't have a home and who is hungry to, just kill it at work. And yet we expect everyone at work to do excellent work without having that sense of belonging. And so, long story short, I realized that if I'm going to write a book that goes deeply, I need to talk about belonging, because it seems like there are so many misunderstandings when it comes to what it is, how you create it, whether you can create it for yourself, and so on and so forth. So I did this crazy deep dive into the topic. And, one of the reasons, I'll be completely honest, and I think that's a journey of many people who decide to write a book. One of the reasons is that I felt like I need to learn things about creating belonging myself. Because for me, for my entire life, I always had doubts about whether I belonged to certain groups. And I always struggled with, an imposter syndrome and the sense of, I'm not entirely sure if people will accept me here. And I can't say that I felt on daily basis like I was being seen and heard and valued and known and understood by all the people in my life. And so I wanted to figure it out for myself. And I know that this is the kind of knowledge and skills that anyone will benefit from. To your second question, when is it coming out? It's hard to say yet because these are still early days. And as you very well know, having published the book yourself, it's a long process. So I don't have a date yet, but I'm definitely going to keep everyone posted when we are ready to publish it.
Enjoying the podcast? If you're looking for more inspiration, head to our website, thecauseeffect.com.au, for more resources on how you can start using your business as a force for good. Or buy the For Love and Money book. Every copy sold allows us to protect 1 square metre of rainforest. Help us save 10,000 square metres by 2025.
I'm curious, like you talked about how it came from your personal feeling that you didn't belong. Is that something you can share with us? Like why you felt that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, when I was, well, first of all, even the story that I shared with you about the ice cream factory, this is really something that is a story of my life. So I often will plunge and just immerse myself in a situation and accept a challenge that is much bigger than my skills. It seems to be a pattern. So every single thing that I did in life, it was a stretch. And when you are in this situation, very often you will meet other practitioners, other business people, other authors, other business people, whatever, fill in the blanks, other consultants. I spent almost 20 years in consulting firms, surrounded by really experienced consultants. And I didn't even have an MBA when I started. I didn't even have master's degree when I first joined, and my colleagues were like, with degrees from Cambridge and Oxford and so on. So the imposter syndrome was one thing, and that was entirely internal. It's this voice that is basically telling you, people are making a mistake about you. They think you are capable. Maybe you can sell yourself really well, but actually you are not capable, and you will be soon found out. So a lot of it is being driven by internal stuff for me. And then there is also, of course, the external stuff. And the external stuff is, I was coming from Eastern Europe and getting into a country where Eastern Europeans, let me put it mildly, were not really valued and appreciated. So immediately there was a bias against me, and immediately people would not see me through that lens of bias, right? And blonde, Eastern European, what does she know, right? About life, about work, whatever. And it was really hard because, people look at you and they don't see you. People pretend to listen, but that they don't really hear you. And I've been in those rooms and I've been in those spaces where I was just, almost like a decorative element, but not really a real person who has something to contribute to the conversation. And that was really painful. And now we know through various sources, including neuroscience, that the sense of being an outsider, the sense of not being seen, not being heard, not being valued, not being known and understood, our brains react to it in the exact same way as they do to physical pain. And it's mind-blowing to me that this can cause so much damage, but I've experienced it and I know that it's very true. So that was one area of my life. The second thing that I think kind of prompted me in a lot of pain that I experienced around the sense of belonging was within my family, and especially with my mom, who always appeared to be this incredibly sociable person, outgoing, an extrovert, an artist. And I left Poland. My parents were divorced. I visited my mom on a regular basis, and she kind of always gave me that impression that she had a very rich social life. Our relationship was a bit challenging sometimes, so I felt like I didn't get into the depth with her that I wanted. And, long story short, my mom fell ill. It was basically more than a year ago. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so basically for the past year, she was dying. And what I realized during that period, and also after her death, is how incredibly lonely she was, and how she never really experienced that sense of belonging in her life, and how she was ashamed to talk about it. And that really broke my heart, I'll be honest. And I'm close to tears now just speaking about this, because this was, the closest person that I had in my life. And yet I didn't know that about her, because it's such a shameful topic. We just don't feel comfortable talking about feeling like we don't belong, because I think it implies that there's something wrong with us.
Wow.
And so the funny thing is that a lot of people will have this experience of feeling a sense of loneliness, feeling like the weird one, the outsider, the outcast. And we will never share it with anyone. If you go to Quora, which is this place where people ask questions, and I just came across this in my research, you'll find literally thousands of people asking the same question. And the question is, am I the only person who feels like I don't belong anywhere?
Mm.
And, the ironic thing is that thousands of people are asking this question, and probably millions, maybe even billions of people around the world have this experience, and we don't talk about it. And so my personal experience, and the experience that I've had with my mom and her unbelonging, and one of the actually sources of learning about her unbelonging were her diaries and a blog that she apparently posted online that I didn't read. That really made me feel like this is definitely a problem that we need to solve in our society.
Wow. So it's personal. It's personal, and
Isn't
you
it
felt
always,
it.
right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that gives you the fire to, really carry that torch forward and create the change that you want to create.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Bringing it back to culture in organizations, where do you see an environment where people truly feel like they belong? Have you seen it?
I've seen it on Teams. And it's very rare, I'll be honest, to see an entire organization where everyone feels like they belong. And to be entirely honest, I also cannot really know, because of course, unless you are a part of an organization, you will never know 100% what the experience is. But I've seen it multiple times and experienced it multiple times on Teams. And for me, where the work really needs to get done is at the team level. We talked about in the context of communities, of the importance of focusing on smaller groups where you can have the depth. And I think in organizations, these smaller groups are teams. And the beauty of focusing on teams and creating a sense of belonging in teams is that it's manageable, and it's actually within the circle of control and influence of team members and leaders. And so suddenly, this huge problem becomes manageable. And one team at a time, you can create that sense of belonging for everyone in the organization. And obviously, there are levers that you can pull to create a sense of belonging at the organizational level as well. For me, the organizations that do it really well are the ones that focus on the third element of belonging. And I'm happy to talk about the remaining two, which is shared purpose and shared values. And I know that your work is in this space. What I've discovered through my work and through my research is that belonging, broadly speaking, you need three things to generate it. And it's not what I believe very often. So the first one is we need to feel valued. It's a perception. And, the fact that we sometimes don't feel valued, as I've mentioned earlier, can be coming from this inner voice that we have. So I feel like if we are trying to create a sense of belonging within a team, it's our sense of, it's actually duty of care probably of leaders to help our team members to deal with those internal voices as well, because they will continuously chip away at their sense of belonging. So feeling valued, but also the second element, adding value. We live in a society that I think has this me culture, right? I want to be valued, but we often forget that we are even unwilling to create that sense of being valued to ourselves. Not to mention to others. And what I've learned about belonging is that it's an act, right? It's a not state of being. So it's equally important to add value to others. And this is not usually the thing that people will think about when they think about a sense of belonging. It's often, people think, I want to find my tribe. I want to find this place where I can belong, where I find like-minded people, and so on and so forth. And I'll be honest, I've been on this quest myself. And then I realized that actually belonging is a verb. And this verb is really all about adding value to others, adding value to a cause that we care about. And a huge part of our sense of belonging is going to come from that, not external validation. And I see in a lot of organizations, managers and leaders, they actually go to great lengths to validate their employees because they've learned on a leadership development program that it's really important to give people positive feedback. The ratio should be 5-1, 5 times positive, 1 time constructive feedback. But it's empty very often, and people don't feel like actually this person has noticed my real contributions and how I'm really adding value. So first, we need to feel ourselves that we are actually adding value to something and to someone. And secondly, of course, when we add this value, we crave being noticed when this has happened. And one of really great litmus tests of, am I feeling valued and am I adding value is, would I be missed if I were gone? And I think it's one of the things that Seth Godin says a lot as well. And I know that you are a big fan of his, as I am. How true is that? I mean, we all crave the sense of being missed when we are gone. But what would make others miss us, right? If we don't add value, they will not miss us. So this is the missing piece for me very often in our lives. Generally, we forget that in order to have that sense of belonging, it's not a quest, it's not a search, it's getting engaged in building belonging every single day, in every single place, because it's a verb, it's not a state. And back to the organizational level, that's all about shared purpose, shared values. It's incredibly important, but there's a lot of dynamic stuff happening between that being valued and adding value.
That is gold. That is gold to me, because I guess what it also says to me, I mean, a couple of things come to mind when you were talking. One is, you've got to be able to give to get, and to find your tribe, to find your people. That's essential, and you can't just be passive. You've got to be active, and that then goes to the second part, which is a word I love and I've adopted in my job title is activist, chief purpose activist, right? And I know, traditionally activist was limited to, people who were out there protesting and everything. But I don't know, I think we live in a world now where the world itself is crying out for activists, for us to show up.
Yeah. This is crazy because this was before I came across your work. And in my keynote, I have like a, signature keynote that I give on fun, meaning, and belonging. And I talk about being an FMB activist. So fun, meaning, belonging activist, because it's really all about taking small actions in this direction. And we don't need more advocates for, causes that we care about. There are way too many people talking about things, right? And we need more actions. We don't need more voices necessarily being heard. And this is the kind of work that less people are willing to do. I feel because probably of the huge power of social media, a lot of people are willing to be ambassadors or advocates of certain causes, but you don't see them really doing the work.
Yeah. And the ones that do really stand out. And I'm coming across many stories of people who feel compelled. They just can't not act. They see something, they experience something, and they have to do it. Can you share with us, before we run out of time, what you found? Is there a link between belonging and well-being, and is there a link to how a business performs?
There's such a strong link, Carolyn, that I'm honestly shocked that we don't talk more often about this and we don't do more work to create belonging, because there's plenty of very solid scientific research that shows us the following. In the absence of a sense of belonging, and it can be even something subtle, like, someone doesn't acknowledge you. You walk in your office, you are in the corridor, and you say good morning to someone, and they are deep in their thoughts and they don't acknowledge you. This creates, your brain, first of all, reacts as if it was physical pain. And then the research basically shows us that we are more prone to mistakes. We are more prone to sort of withdrawing into ourselves, not contributing enough. Our performance drops significantly when we feel like we don't belong. And often, and I think we see this in cases like mass shootings, this is an extreme, but when you take it to an extreme, people will really often move to drastic measures like aggression. And it happens in the workplace as well. People will sabotage something, or they will become verbally violent with their team members. And it's happening because they are not feeling seen, literally and metaphorically. And in a situation where not being seen, often, especially if we're not mature enough, if we haven't done, our psychotherapy and so on and so forth, we will resort to maybe not such a constructive way of getting ourselves noticed. So there is a lot of danger there when people feel like they don't belong. And certainly, we don't go the extra mile for anything if we don't feel like we belong to the team. And on the flip side, the benefits are really just the direct opposite of what goes wrong. So when we feel like we belong, when we feel like we're being seen, heard, included, known, understood, and valued, we perform better. The impact on performance actually is mind-blowing. We contribute more, we are more empathetic, so we focus more on others and less on ourselves. We are more creative, we can be more innovative. And there are neurological reasons for that. Basically, belonging was our survival strategy, and we still have the same brains. And so when we feel like we don't belong, we're basically in this constant, perpetual fight or flight state of mind, where obviously we cannot use our neocortex, the rational part of our brain, the creative part of our brain, and everything just falls apart. So belonging creates really the optimum conditions for our brain to function, for our human skills to be implemented, like connecting with others, like understanding, listening to others, caring about others, etc., etc. So plenty of research, direct connections. And as I said, that just makes me feel like, wow, there's such a great opportunity here if we can only learn how we can create more belonging on an everyday basis.
That's so powerful. And even what you described of the cost of unbelonging, you used that word before, and the cost of unbelonging, how many people have felt that, and they've felt those emotions that you've talked about?
Yeah. One of the key reasons for suicidal thoughts for people is people feel like no one will care. Like, I won't be missed. I don't belong. So this is literally the thing that is pushing people to take their lives. And I want to address that because, of course, people's ability to fulfill their potential and enjoy work, it's important, but we're not just talking about performance at work. We're talking about mental well-being in other parts of our lives. And this is really the most fundamental human need without which we really cannot thrive. We can't often survive without a sense of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what my biggest outtake from this, and I have so many outtakes, but the biggest one is really, where you shared the two elements of, people need to feel valued, but they need to add value. And that sense of, as you said, belonging is a verb. You've got to act, you've got to show up and be seen and act and get into the arena in order to create it as well. And I think that's such a powerful insight. Now, I know you've got to go, and this has been an extraordinary conversation. I've absolutely loved it. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about here. But I'd like to finish by asking you a question of, what is your greatest ambition for business as we look into the future? You did mention, you probably won't see it in your lifetime, but if we look forward to 2030 or 5 years from now, what would be your greatest hope for what workplaces could look like?
Well, so in trying to be realistic and at the same time ambitious for the next 5 years, I would say I would really like to see observable and measurable shift from industrial capitalism towards more of a regenerative approach to business. We really need to wake up and realize that we cannot have this exploitative approach to the planet, to our society, to our employees, and that the only way for businesses to thrive is to generate true value and really think about how we can regenerate our societies, our planet, and human well-being. So for me, in my space, as you know, I focus on company culture. This measurable change that I would like to see is I would like to see some of the most valued companies in the world, even, on stock exchange, to be organizations that have really bought into this vision of making work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. Because by doing that and by making that difference, we are having an impact not just within these organizations, but also in the society. Because let's be honest, our experience at work is really impacting our experience in life, full stop, right? It really jumps the fence and follows us home. When we have a stressful day at work, we all know what it looks like at the dinner table, right? So for me, one of the most important things that organizations can do is truly invest in this work. And I'd like to see these organizations being the top organizations on stock exchange as well, so that we can finally see how this is getting translated into business success.
What an amazing vision. I love it. Now, before I let you go, I can't wait for your book to come out. Is there a link that we can share where people can register their interest in learning about when your book does come out?
Yes. Yeah, I will provide the link. I think probably the best thing to really get updates on everything that I create and my team creates is just signing up to our newsletter, the Culture Lab Insider. So I'll provide this link with you, Caroline. If you can add it to the show notes, that would be amazing. And then if people just want to follow our work, I would say a great place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. This is a platform that I I'm probably most active on, and I love connecting with people over there. And please visit my website as well, which is agabajer.com, AGABAJER.com. You'll find the podcast there. And you'll hear Carolyn on the podcast as well, because we're going to basically turn the tables, and I'm going to interview you next week. So for all your listeners who would finally like to hear from you, not just from your guests, this is a great opportunity to hear about your work. And there is a blog. There is a lot of information about the work we're doing with organizations. And I think one of the things that I would particularly like to encourage people to check out is the Culture Brain community. It's small, it goes deep, it's for the change makers. So if you feel like you are looking for new, better ways of cultivating a thriving culture, you will meet a bunch of really interesting people who are interested in the same topic. And I can guarantee it's going to be an amazing experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aga, for joining us today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for having me. And I really look forward to our conversation next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?